Admittedly, Lot 159, which is a lithograph entitled Our Jolly Cook from 1864 by Winslow Homer, does not first strike the viewer as a Homer, but he actually started his career as an apprentice to a lithographer in Boston in the 1850s. And he made this work some 10 years later after he'd established a studio in New York, but still roughly 10 years before he hit his stride as a well-known painter in the city. It wasn't until the 1870s in New York, after he'd gone to Paris and observed what the Impressionists were producing, that he started making paintings that the art collecting world of New York and the rest of America really took notice of. Artists who are so famous to us today, like Homer, it has to be remembered, started off with more humble beginnings. They were apprentices in printmaking shops, and then even 10 or 15 years into their career, were still producing illustrations for newspapers or magazines or lithographs in this case to supplement their income. As I said, until he actually started selling paintings and became famous in the 70s. This was what he needed to do to afford to live as an artist in New York. Lot 319 is an etching by Childe Hassam of Battery Park from 1916. And Hassam is an artist very much like Homer and any number of American artists who began their careers in the middle to late 19th century, that they visited Paris. It was part of their education, their artistic training to visit Paris. And at the time that Homer and Hassam were in Paris, the roots of Impressionism were being sowed. So it's not surprising that Hassam returns from Paris full of the influence of the Impressionists and begins work in that vein. And while he created mainly prints of landscapes in and around Connecticut and Long Island, he also made a handful of prints of New York City at a time when really the city was being born, when the skyscrapers were rising out of the ground in New York in the early teens. And these are among Hassam's most cherished etchings. This is a view that shows the tension between the park landscape of New York and the rising skyscrapers in the background. It's a city in transition, and this image sums that up in 1916. Hassam might be better known as a painter, and certainly his output was more prolific as a painter, but he also made several hundred prints, mainly etchings, a handful of lithographs, and he worked throughout the first half of the 20th century. Lot 49 is Stanley Hayter's Falling Figure. It's a color engraving with soft ground etching from 1947. Hayter, a European artist, founded a printmaking workshop, which is known as Atelier 17, in Paris in the early 20th century. During the Second World War, he was forced to pull the studio out of Paris, and he moved it to New York. In the 1930s in Paris, Hayter was working with such artists as Miro and André Masson and Max Ernst and other well-known European modernists. And he takes all that experience and brings it to New York, and in New York is influential on a whole group of young American artists who only know the printmaking of sort of the traditional schools of American printmaking of the early 20th century. He's a huge force in bringing modernism in printmaking to the United States. This is a multi-layered, multicolored image using several different techniques of intaglio all at once on a plate. One thing about Hayter's plates, they're all extremely well worked. You can just see the craftsmanship in his etchings. You have a feeling that a lot of time and a lot of continuous time, it seems to me. A lot of energetic time was spent on these. It's as if he got bitten by some creative bug, had the idea, and had to put it down on the plate. You feel the spontaneity. One of the reasons I think why Hayter was so influential and such a great teacher of printmakers is that he's primarily a printmaker. He's not known as a painter or an architect like so many other artists that we offer prints by in this auction. His main pursuit is printmaking, not only making prints himself, but imparting his knowledge of printmaking on artists around him. Hayter is essentially a printmaker's printmaker. Lot 723 is a print by Robert Motherwell, Gesture 1, State 1. It's a color aquatint from 1976 to 1977. Motherwell was an artist like Pollock or Franz Kline, who as young artists worked in Atelier 17 making prints in New York. They were directly influenced by Stanley Hayter and the other European artists who Hayter had invited to Atelier 17 in New York at the time. These were the young artists who laid the foundation for the abstract expressionist movement in New York in the mid-20th century. This print, while a mid-career print by Motherwell, to me sums up his career as a printmaker. Virtually every image he created in print or painting is an abstract gestural image that takes its cues from Asian calligraphy and sort of the spontaneity of ink hitting the paper with brush and ink. Somehow he translates that spontaneity that you see in brush and ink work on paper to what is essentially a very controlled technique here, aquatint. This is something that would have taken a while to build up, and it's a fairly complex printmaking technique made to look easy and immediate in this image, but not without thought. This is an artist proof. It's signed and then inscribed AP Roman numeral 10 over Roman numeral 10. The regular edition of this print is 75, and oftentimes with modern and contemporary prints, there'd be an additional 10 to 20 artist proofs or commerce impressions, those impressions that were reserved for the printer, the publisher, the artist, impressions not for sale, essentially. As an artist proof and a contemporary print, we don't expect it to look vastly different from the regular published edition. This is not a proof in the strictest sense of what we think of an artist proof, such as a working proof or bringing something to the published stage. This is already in the published stage. It's merely a tack-on to the regular edition. There are over 700 artists represented in this auction, and it's more certainly than we could touch on in a single video. And this sale is a wonderful opportunity for a glimpse into the last 100 years of printmaking. It's one that really deserves more time spent perusing the catalog or coming to the exhibition and seeing the works themselves. It's a real opportunity for us to share our excitement with this sale and in printmaking itself with those of you who also have a passion for prints.